Hey, how you doing? This is John, and welcome to John's Long Box. I'm here with Jeff Nelson. Now, Jeff, you're friends with Ed Lillard, right?
Yes, I am. Yep,
Yeah,
Lily. Yep.
Ed, our mutual buddy RJ from the Fourth Age discovered him and brought him on. Like we have a group show.
Oh, really? Cool. Yeah, I've
Yeah,
actually been trying to reach out to. I actually funny you mentioned that. I commented on one of RJ's videos a while back, and I believe I emailed him a free ebook for my novel, and I just wanted to. I saw he downloaded it because on the app I was using, I could see who opens my emails and who downloads them. So I saw he opened it and he got it. I tried following up with him to see what he thinks, and he's not gotten back to me, which I'm sure
yeah,
he's busy.
he's a reclusive person. I'm not even joking. He lives out in the woods in northern Canada in a log cabin that he built by himself. It
Oh,
sounds like
really? I'm kind of jealous, actually. I live in Vernon, which is in Connecticut, and it's not as bad as where I used to live, which was the city, but it's still more folks than I would like around me. So I'm kind of jealous that he lives out in the middle of
I
nowhere.
think one of those folks. I think my brother just moved near you, out northern Connecticut.
Yep.
Yeah, he's
Yep.
got bears in his backyard and everything.
I'm right
He
by
had a
Yukon.
couple living out here, and yeah, I'm in Long Island, but he
Oh,
was closer
cool.
to the city than me. Yeah, so RJ, he's like I said, he literally I think goes to his sister's house to use the internet.
Oh, that's cool.
So he's it's hard to get in touch with him if he doesn't if he's if you don't have that window of opportunity.
Yeah,
But he
right.
introduced me to Ed, who's your buddy, and Ed
Yep.
is super talented. He's been on my
Yes.
channel a few times, and he wanted to. He has a whole book that's done.
Yep.
He didn't know how to do crowdfunding, so I did one crowdfund that was I think I did pretty well. So we just did like a couple of shows, like 5 or 6 1-hour shows, all about crowdfunding. How to
Cool.
start, how to begin, how to. It was a lot of fun. I'm looking forward when he's ready to crowdfund to helping him out any way I can. But then he reached out and said, "Hey, why don't you talk to my buddy Jeff?" So
Yeah.
tell us who you are, what's going on.
So yeah. My name is Jeff Nelson. I wrote a book recently called Ninja Punks Fuck Off is the name of the book. Pardon my French. It's basically. So I grew up in the 90s, where ninjas were the coolest possible thing that you could possibly, have. Like, every show I feel like had a ninja in it. Like even the Power Rangers tried to work ninjas into their lore.
Well, I
At
thought
some
the
point.
Power Rangers were like brightly colored ninjas,
Kinda, yeah, but I think there was this character called I'm not super well versed in the lore of Power Rangers at this point, but wasn't there a character called like Ninjor or something like
Yeah,
that?
something
And
like that. Yeah,
so
the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I think
yeah,
that
Ninja
started everything.
Turtles, and you had in GI Joe there
Snake
was
Eyes.
yep, Snake Eyes. Granted, again, I'm not a huge GI Joe fan. Was he always a character in GI Joe, or is
I
he
think
like
he was one of the original Joes.
All right, cool, yeah. So yeah, basically, I grew up in the 90s where ninjas were the coolest thing ever. So that kind of, I'm sure, had an impact on me. And I am, when I was like 9, 10, 11, that's when, Toonami started to go on Cartoon Network. So I watched a lot of, Dragon Ball Z and, all those cartoons from Japan that were starting to get big in America, before they became cool, though, back in, what they don't tell you is that back in the late 90s and the 2000s, if you watched stuff from Japan, it was kind of taboo to do so. Now it's huge and it's everywhere, but back in the day, not so much. So I think I kind of always had, my entrance into nerd culture wasn't so much through Western comics, even though I do like them, once I got into high school, I started reading a lot of DC. I read a lot of Batman, and I read a lot of X-Men and things like that. But that was more, that was later. But yeah, I've always, I was always, and basically I wrote my first story when I was 11 because, or I was 10 or 11, I forget exactly. But basically, it's frankly a story that I'm still working on. I started on it
because one of the first stories that you ever wrote, you're not finished with, and you're still working on.
Kind of, yeah. I mean,
I'm
it's
doing
still
the same thing. I have this idea for my whole life, and I don't even want to talk about it. But like, I just can't get it to work.
Yeah,
and it's like it's at this point, it's just frustration, and I'm gonna finish it someday.
Yeah, it's kind of the weird thing about it is that, like, I think my biggest issue with it is that I never sat down and said I was going to finish it. That's kind of my biggest problem, I think. I think if I sat down and said, this is going to get done no matter what, let's go. I think I could do it. It's just, yeah, I just think
I have a bad habit of, I have an idea. I want to make this into a story. So I'm going to make it into a story. Like I'll make it into, even though it's not that good, even though, I can't use it for, I'm just too stubborn to quit. Like, I guess a good writer would be like, I'm going to shelve that for a while. It's like, no,
I mean, I think it depends, honestly. Like, I think, like, here's the thing about writing that people don't often understand is that, like, you kind of realize that everything is connected, and you can take two subjects that are completely separate and make them work in conjunction with the other. For instance, my book is about punk rock and ninjas, two things that are, you would think on the surface, completely not related. But then, you start reading about Japanese culture, like, for my book, I read a few Japanese classics, one of which is the Tale of the Heike, which was written in, God, I think like the 12th or 13th century. And it's about the Genpei War, which effectively ended the Heian era in Japan, which was the classical era of Japan, and it began the more militarized feudal era. That
are you what they call a weeb? You into Japanese, or is this?
I'm into Japanese culture. Yes, I am absolutely what you would call a weeb. The Last Samurai was.
That's not an insult to me. I mean, I'm fascinated.
Listen,
even though I don't watch manga, I barely read. I don't watch anime, and I barely read manga.
Listen,
I'm just fascinated with Japan. I just love.
Listen, it's fine. I will call myself a weeb. I'm a black belt in jiu-jitsu.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I'm definitely a weeb. I don't take offense to it. It's all good, my friend. But
But you wrote a book. So ninjas, you're also into punk rock?
Yes, I am. I was a punk kid.
I'm a big punk rock. What's some of the bands that you like? Oh, I'm getting cramped.
Let's see. I grew up listening to
I could talk about punk
Black
rock.
Flag, Pennywise, the Circle Jerks. Let's see.
Isn't it funny? You could name 100 bands, but as soon as somebody asks you, you freeze up.
Yeah, like I went to a lot of local shows. Actually, it's funny you say this. My friend is at someone. I haven't seen him in a while, but we were friends back in the day, and we're still cool. But this guy, Chris Jones, who is actually now working in tech, and I believe now with the shutdown of TikTok, he's now working on an app called Neptune. But he was in a punk band, like in the mid 2000s, called Stress Bomb. And so yeah, like I was very much into them. I was into I was into The Offspring. That was kind of an intro into punk rock. I know they're kind of like seen as like more poppy, but
somebody just asked me who is the greatest punk band. We were talking about hardcore punk band, and I thought, and I had to say the Bad Brains.
Bad Brains, yeah, I like Bad Brains.
Oh my God. I just started re-listening to the Bad Brains at work because I do.
Suicidal Tendencies considered hardcore? Because I'm a fan of that.
Yeah, they're California punk, California hardcore punk. I didn't like them for the longest time, and then everybody likes that song "Institutionalized." But I didn't like. And then I don't know what it was. I went to go see a band. And I guess the DJ had to go to the bathroom or something like that because he just put on a whole side of a Suicidal Tendencies record. Mm-hmm. And I was like, this is awesome. And my friend was just like, oh, yeah, you really like this, huh? Yeah, it's suicidal tendencies. And I was like,
There is
well,
something about getting in a disgusting venue with a bunch of people who are generally just mad and they want to get their, then they want to get their, some of their aggression out, and you just and you just sprint as fast as you can around in a circle until the
yeah,
band stops playing. There's
yeah.
just
I
it's
remember
just
when we
great.
were 15, 16 years old, my friend Jimmy and I, we used to hop on the train and go to downtown Manhattan. We used to go CBGB's for the
Nice, yeah.
matinee. And we would go there like ready to fight. We never fought, but we were like talking tough. We were,
Yeah.
and then we'd go and, do the stage diving and jumping around and everything.
I was always too big for stage diving, unfortunately.
Well, at 15, I believe it or not, I learned the hard way that once you hit about 200 pounds, you don't stage dive anymore. I ran it the last time. I wish I could remember the band, but I got up on CBGB's has a tiny little band that you could just literally just jump up on. It's like, it's probably up to your knees.
Yeah.
Just so everybody can see the band. You jump up there, you yell into the microphone, and then when you realize you're overstaying your welcome, you jump, and everybody parted because I guess I was too big. And
yeah, unfortunately, I think CBGB's, when did it close down again? Wasn't it like in 2008 or something like that?
Yeah. They upped the rent to $35,000 a month.
Really?
Yeah, that's why they closed.
Didn't they move to Las Vegas or something like that? Wasn't there something they moved to Las Vegas?
Hilly Crystal sold it. And he was getting old. I used to go back when his mother used to take this little old lady just sitting behind taking the money. But he sold it to whatever. I'd speculate. I don't know. And what they did was they cut all of the walls down because it was all covered with graffiti.
Mm-hmm.
CBGB's originally it was they just did graffiti and then they just put like planks over because they wanted to preserve the graffiti.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was another wave of graffiti. So they took those two planks and they just made like a CBGB's in Vegas, that's not CBGB's, and then just put up the original planks and then made it look like CBGB's so you could go and get like, I guess, an $18 cocktail or something like that.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, it was filled with 16-year-old kids with fake IDs, getting $3 beers.
It is kind of interesting how punk culture has kind of been turned into a novelty almost when back
do my things. Punk rock is, now it's pop. People like it because it's popular, and same with comic books, people who I was just telling this story yesterday. Forgive me for talking about myself. We should be talking about your book, but we'll get to your book. There was this girl. She was just beautiful. She was like one of the hottest girls in high school. And here I am, junior year, and I'm lending a kid. I brought. He was like, I like punk, but I don't like to listen to. So I gave him the standard punk rock, DI, Dead Kennedys, Black Flag, Circle Jerks, Fear. Like here, this is like the 101 punk rock stuff. Listen to this. Give them back to me in 1 week.
Yep.
I just remember when he was giving them back, he was like, "That's so good." Yeah. But I was kind of like, don't make a big deal about it. This is kind of weird. People make fun of us. And I remember that girl was like, you listen to that kind of music? She just like wagged her finger in my face. And I was like, leave me alone. And then, so now it's 3 years later, me and my friends are in a bar, we're in our 20s.
Yeah.
There's this gorgeous girl in a skirt, just legs all over the place. And she goes, John? And I'm like, yeah. And my friend Terry, who's the biggest poon hound you ever met, he goes, John, go. And I recognized her instantly. And I just got, like with Chappelle, when Keeping It Real goes wrong,
yes.
Example. So she's like, oh, and she's talking to her gorgeous friends. And she's like, oh, this guy listens to the cool music, blah, blah. And I just was like, you made fun of me. You made fun of me and I just couldn't control the anger. You know what I mean? And she was like, I had every in, and I just too stubborn. Like I had to like a bad story. I can't forgive the hot girl for making fun of me. If it's
any consolation, when I was 17 or 18, I was a senior in high school, and I was always a bit of a contrarian. I was asked to prom by so there was a girl who asked me to prom, and I'm like, I don't want to go to prom. I don't want to wear a tuxedo. I don't want to it just sounded lame to me. Yeah. And I said to her, I was like, I was planning on going to a punk show that night, so I was like, I don't really want to go to prom, but if you want to go to this punk show with me, you can come with me to this punk show that's in the middle of the projects in New London, Connecticut. It was at, have you ever been to, did you ever go to the LNG?
No.
Yeah, that was my main venue that I went to, which actually it's the name of the venue that's in my book. It's just,
It's probably too late for me. I used to go to
Yeah.
Connecticut. You ever go to the Anthrax?
no, I didn't.
Oh, it was, it was the craziest.
What town was it in?
I'm trying to remember what town it is, but this was the late 80s.
Yeah, I was. not even born yet.
I moved to New Mexico in '93, so I'm sure I missed this place. But it was you driving through a nice suburban town,
Mhm.
and then you go down the wrong street, and it's like an industrial park. There's like muffler repairs, stuff like
Yep.
that. And then there's 900 kids just drinking in a parking lot.
That's
and
awesome.
it's just between a muffler repair place and like, I don't know, like an AutoZone or something. Not even an AutoZone, because that would be like a storefront, but it was just like an industrial park. And it was just a handwritten sign, like spray painted the Anthrax. And it was just like, it was owned by like 16-year-old kids. And you went
That's
in
awesome.
there, and it was they couldn't have a liquor license or beer license because it was kids. So they sold Jolt Cola. If you remember Jolt Cola, all the sugar, twice the caffeine.
Oh yeah, I remember Jolt Cola.
So you had like, I'm not even joking. Like every show was $5 because that's what Ian MacKaye said shows should cost, and we were keeping it real. So every show was $5, and you packed in there. I saw the Bad Brains there, Fugazi there, the Descendants there. I took my little brother there, and it's just so funny because if you had a crowd of kids drinking beer, there comes a point when you drink a beer when you're just like too woozy to do, but you had a crowd of kids just chugging twice the sugar, all the caffeine.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was just fights, kids, bloody noses, like literally just drinking too much of this cola, and their blood pressure would, their nose would start bleeding. And then
I remember seeing,
because it was a death trap.
Yeah, I remember. I'm 6'4" and I'm over 200 pounds, so I never jumped off stage myself because they'd be too scared to catch me. But like I remember dudes just flying there, and I get whacked in the face by just a body flying through the air, and it was just fun, man.
Yeah, I loved it. But like, what you were saying, after the stage dive and everything, I remember riding back on the train just like,
all the endorphins are out.
On Monday. I go to school on Monday. It's like, everything's cool. Like you literally got all your aggression out at the punk rock show. And it's funny because at the punk rock shows, you're like, society sucks. And then you're 16 years old, and it's just like, I got no responsibilities. It was just like just hormones and hitting puberty, your body changing,
Yeah,
it was fun. I liked it. And then, like I said, I moved out to Albuquerque, and it was a whole different punk scene. And my friends out in Albuquerque were like, "You never heard of this band? You never like." It was almost like going to another planet of like punk bands that I'd never heard of. But it was really cool because the LA bands would travel to New York, and the New York bands would travel to. They all stopped in Albuquerque.
Yeah.
So
the Los Angeles scene is. I wish I was there in the '80s for that California scene, for Black Flag and all those. The Minutemen, all those bands. I wish I was there.
I used to be, before I had my beard, and I was real fat. I was a dead ringer for D Boon.
Really cool.
Yeah, and my name is Bua, so they would call me like, D Bua, and stuff.
It is kind of funny though how like it's popular now, but like punk and stuff like that, it's kind of into the general cultural zeitgeist. But if you think about it, like think back in the late 70s, what naming your band the Dead Kennedys was. I mean, think about how shocking that was back in the 70s.
To the point they were asked change your name, and they said, okay, Ted's next was going to be, and they were like, okay,
but like it's just like, I mean, I'm not going to say what the modern equivalent to that would be, but you can use your imagination. It's just like, but like, it's a, and even suicidal tendencies. Like this was during the satanic panic and stuff like that, and everyone was afraid of suicide and stuff like that. And I mean, I think this was concurrent with they're not a punk band, but Judas Priest was on trial because everyone thought that they were putting subliminal messages for kids to kill themselves, listen to the music. So that's
And
awesome.
Ozzy Osbourne Suicide Solution.
Yep.
There was a girl in my school whose older brother put the shotgun in his mouth while playing Suicide Solution. It made the news, you know, and
Yeah. Wait,
we were like, holy crap, you know.
was it your
My mother was
school?
like, "You don't listen to that Ozzy Osbourne, do you?" I'm like, "Please, mom, that's too tame for me."
Wait, so that was at your school? I remember back in the day, I was reading about like all of the issues surrounding that, and
Yeah.
I think I recall reading that story about a kid who did that while listening to
Yeah,
Ozzy Osbourne.
I was in third, fourth grade, so this was
Oh, wow.
probably like 84 or so. And I don't want to mention the girl's name because it's
Obviously.
it's not right. But she was one of my best friends.
Yeah.
A girl, it was her best friend, and he was, I think, a year older than us or 2 years older than us, and he just was one of those kids that just had like a doom aura about him.
Yeah.
I mean, like even in like third grade, you'd look at him and you're just like, I don't want to be around him. Like
Yeah.
you know, just because you knew like he was going to get hit by lightning and then you were going to get, whatever. And I'll never forget. We won it. It was sixth grade. I remember because it was my sixth grade teacher took us into a room. So he must have been in eighth grade and, told us about what happened. And we were like, what the, and it was just like, because it was a small public school. There was only like, there was two classes. There was like 6A and 6B,
Mm-hmm.
and 30, so there was like 70 kids a grade. So we all knew each other, Yeah. And I remember right after high school, she went to that counselor because he was seeing a counselor. And she was just like, "Oh, do you think you help?" And like, "Oh yeah, we help you." And she goes, "Well, what about?" And she mentioned her brother's name, and they were like, "Because I'm his sister." It was a big deal. Wow. It was like a minor. I don't know. I didn't realize it went out past my neighborhood, but unless it happened more than once that I'm not aware of,
I mean, I again, I don't remember too many of the details, but I mean, I can't imagine it happened too often, So I mean, again, it could be the same person, and it could not be. Who knows?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, sorry, but yeah, so so I do kind of get into like the aspects of the punk scene as sort of I experienced it as a kid in my book, and I kind of I mean, I've spoken to a lot about it to Ed, and he actually read a few chapters of it before it got released. I still have to. Yeah, that's it. I still got to send the book, but basically, it's kind of a lot of it's about punk as I see it in my life now that I'm older, because ultimately you kind of realize that you can only say F the system for so long until it just becomes not conducive to anything other than you being mad.
Like the ultimate punk band, the band that like, even if you're not into punk, you could mention the Ramones, everybody knows. And even the Ramones were just like, hey, calm down,
Yeah.
These guys were, basically right wingers. They liked Reagan, and they cared about their stock portfolios.
I mean, Johnny Ramone definitely loved George Bush. I mean,
you wrote a song about what's her name, Maria Bartolona, with the stock woman, the good looking, you know what I mean? But so like they wanted to rebel, but they needed a society so they could rebel.
Yeah, I mean,
they
ultimately,
even Johnny Rotten was just like,
Yeah, I mean. And I think ultimately if people become too smitten with like that punk rock superego, they kind of forget why they got into punk rock in the first place, where they wanted to kind of find themselves, but you didn't really find yourself. You just ended up kind of doing the same thing that the guy working the day job does, who you can't stand, but the guy working the day job seems to be a lot happier than you are being, going to the punk scene every day, which that's kind of something that I ran into. And that's kind of what I get into in my book, where ultimately the answer isn't necessarily to rebel. It's to find like a deeper meaning of conformity, which that's kind of the essence of my book.
it's funny because I think everybody who joins a subculture at some point they realize I'm a conformist too. I'm just
Yep.
conforming to a smaller group.
Yep.
You
And
know, and I remember my friend Jimmy that when he was like, "Hey guys, let's all conform together."
yeah,
And I was like,
I think, so yeah, so my message is in the book is kind of, I mean, it's kind of I guess you can say that, I mean, South Park kind of did their episode about the goth kids saying like, oh, what do you have to do to rebel? You have to just, or to be a nonconformist, you have to look, talk, and act exactly like us.
right.
My message isn't really that. It's to simply find yourself, which, which is effectively, if you read like Joseph Campbell or Myth or things like that, effectively they're they have many meanings, but ultimately the meaning that you can draw through all of them is to break down the barriers of your own self-perception, which is to say your ego, and kind of experience the universe as it's experienced, which is to say find the self in your psyche, which that's kind of what I get into in the book.
If we could get philosophical for a minute, when you do non-conform, nobody likes you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like nobody likes
Gigi Allen.
Yeah.
Gigi Allen is a great example of that.
Who was, I'm sorry?
Gigi Allen. He was he was
he was also gross. And by the way,
he was crazy, yeah.
Allen died in 93. That was the end of punk. That's my you can't outdo Gigi Allen.
I've never listened to his band. I've heard they weren't very good though.
They were great.
Oh, they were? Oh, sorry.
They were great. Gigi Allen. But the thing is, he was punk rock. He was disgusting. I guess this is where I tell my Gigi Allen story again. But Gigi and the Jabbers, GB, every album was a different band because he never paid them. Because I think he just like bought drugs and everything. But this was a guy, like his first album, it was like he had this like he was like this nerdy little wiry guy. And then he went to jail. And when he came back, he was like, I think something really bad happened to him in jail.
Most likely.
Anyway, I was in a bar called Downtown Beirut playing pinball. And I was playing pinball. And also this guy comes, puts his arm around me, puts a quarter on the table and goes, if you win, you're going to F this girl. And he points to the waitress. The waitress is like, and I'm like, and then I realize it's Gigi Allen. And I'm like, and I'm like, oh, I have AIDS. He just touched me. I have AIDS now. I don't want to insult him. It's like a wild animal.
Yeah.
It's like a brush fire is right here, like or a bear or a wolverine or something like that. What am I gonna say? And he's so I was like, oh God. So I was like, yeah, okay, and I'm playing, and I'm like, whoops, I lost, and I just got out of there, and I'm glad I did, because right next door or two storefronts down, it was Hogs and Heifers. We went there and drank. I was like, I'm getting out of here, and there was like a bar fight. They're throwing them out, glasses being smashed. I was like,
and just like, even like you watch interviews with like Henry Rollins from back in the 80s. He seems very unhappy in a lot of those interviews. He seems like he just seems like generally not happy. Like he seems to be upset with the reporter. He seems to be upset about being at the venue. He just seems generally upset.
I don't know how much of that is an act or whatever, because I saw him. It was Tool. I forget the Rollins band, whatever. And Tool was playing. I didn't particularly like them, so I was hanging out in the back.
Yeah.
And there's a guy standing next to me, but I'm focusing on the band and I'm watching. And all of a sudden I'm like, hey, Henry, how you doing? He's like, hey, how you doing? I was like, I'm John. He's like, hey, I'm Henry. And we just started talking about music. He just seemed like a happy guy, and
really?
he's like, this, I like this. Where can I go to eat? And it was like all normal and everything. I was like, he goes, well, I got to go get ready, John. He was like, nice to meet you. And then he got on stage and it was like, so I don't know how much that was kayfabe. And then my friend met him at Tower Records. He was signing. And he was like, you met my friend John at the Tool show. And he was like, oh, yeah. Like he just made it up. I remember John. John was great. Yeah.
That's funny.
They said he was just like pleasant. So, he's a Hollywood actor now. So, whatever.
I was surprised actually this can tie back into my anime. obsession. But like, I mean, granted, like, I don't think it's safe. I mean, I could be judged for this, but if you get into like the show, if you get into the show, sorry, if you get into the show, Avatar: The Last Airbender and its follow-up
I
show,
love that show.
yeah, but he voiced the villain in the Legend of Korra.
Oh, he did? I didn't know that.
He voiced Zahir. He's the voice of Zahir, is Henry Rollins.
Oh,
yeah.
I didn't know that.
And it's actually funny is that I used to be a journalist for a magazine. This was over a decade ago. And I emailed him because I was covering, general media and entertainment. And I know he was the voice of Zahir. So I emailed him saying, hey, Henry, I wrote this book. I mean, sorry. I am a journalist for a magazine, and I would like to ask you some questions about your role as Zahir in the Legend of Korra. And he responded. He seemed fine, and he was like, "Yeah, I'd be happy to answer, some questions." And I sent him the email with the questions, and I told him up front, like these are going to be about the Legend of Korra and your role in it. And almost all of his questions were like, and
about him.
And almost all of his answers to my questions were like super curt, like very like one sentence. I'm like you knew I was going to ask you these questions. Like it just kind of seemed like it was a job for him, and he didn't really care about the show. And like in my head, I'm like,
oh, I get you.
How you felt about it? Why did you agree to have me send you the questions? Like I was kind of like surprised at that at the time.
Yeah.
But, that's that was kind of my only experience with him. But who knows?
I was trying to, while you were talking, he has an album called The End of Silence.
Yeah.
That was his first album on a major label. If you flip the back album over, it's a crowd scene from the first Lollapalooza.
Yeah.
You're going to see a guy like this with the baseball hat. It said Sub Pop, but they blocked it out. That's me.
Oh, that's cool. Sub Pop was a cool, like grunge I was really much into too. Like I was into, grunge was Soundgarden from the 80s. Like, man, when I first listened to Louder Than Love by Soundgarden, that album blew my brains out.
Oh, I'll never forget. My friend was having a party in Hoboken, New Jersey, and he put that album on, and like, because at this time I'm all like punk rock and everything, and I started to get different stuff like Butthole Surfers and everything like that.
I love Butthole Surfers.
And then that album came on, and I was like, this because I secretly still loved Led Zeppelin. I couldn't admit that to my friends. I still loved like Led Zeppelin and the Beatles.
Screeching Weasel.
I
hate Led Zeppelin.
Like punk rock metal is the only way to describe it. It just blew me away. So
yeah,
I got into Soundgarden, Mudhoney.
Tad. Yeah, Mudhoney's awesome. Yeah. Like I think honestly, and I've made this. I think. Do you know about the story of Andrew Wood and Mother Love Bone? I've argued that had he not died, his band would have been effectively the Nirvana of the 90s.
Probably.
They would have been the biggest band in the 90s. And
if anybody doesn't know, Andrew Wood was like a Seattle, like he was the hot shot Seattle guy.
And Mother Love Bone.
And Mother Love Bone. And Mother Love Bone was like on track to be the big band. I forget, he was a drug overdose or something.
Yep. I think on the eve of their tour that was going to get them huge, he died of an overdose of drugs.
And then basically Mudhoney, Soundgarden, and Pearl Jam all merged and created an album called Temple of the Dog, because that was his nickname, Dog, and that's that all songs either inspired by him or about him.
Say Hello to Him and Reach Down were directly about him, and that's how Vedder got his shot, because he was a surfer dude in California, and he got word that they were looking for someone to do a duet with Cornell on one of the songs on that record. So he auditioned and got it. And basically after they finished the record, Chris Cornell and Matt Cameron went back to Soundgarden, and Vedder and Ament and the rest of them formed Pearl Jam.
That was like one of the first like musical movements. I got in on the ground floor, you know.
Yeah, I mean, like I was a kid. Like it's so weird with the grunge movement. Like I was born in May of sorry in May of '89. So like
Oh my
I
god, I
was
feel so old.
so yeah. So I
I
was
graduated high
5.
school.
So yeah, I was 5 when no, I was I was so I was not even 5 when Cobain died. So, but I remember like as a kid, just like sitting in the back seat of my mom's car and just listening to grunge music because my brother was 12, so he was into all that music. So like to this day, I go on Spotify and I throw on a playlist from the '90s, and I'm like, oh my god, I remember that song from the back of my mom's Windstar. Like, oh, like you know, it's crazy, you know.
They got so big too. Like all those bands started out as nowhere.
Yep.
Do you know Mia Zapata?
No, I don't.
She was a you know, obviously a female singer. She was in a band called the Gits, and I was in Seattle, and they were like the girl band that was going to be big. Or maybe maybe I'm misremembering, but like, or maybe it's because she died, so therefore everybody, you know. But she was like assaulted and murdered one night, and I think that it was never solved.
Oh,
So,
really?
like, you know, and it was just everywhere. Mia Zapata, you know, everywhere, and you know,
I never heard that name.
and then of course the album soared after she died. You know, kind of like
I mean,
everybody liked Nirvana after Kurt Cobain died.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting too, where like with a lot of artists like that, if you tragically pass away, your album can either soar to new heights or it can be forgotten. And I think that's what happened with the album Apple by Love Bone, is that like it was kind of forgotten about. I didn't even know about that band until I was in my teens and I saw singles because one of their songs is on that soundtrack. And I was like, and I was like, who's this? And I'm like, this song's amazing. And from there, I got into them more. I was like, man, this band's great. And I learned their
like I think had Jim Morrison lived, I think the Doors would have been forgotten.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's funny you mentioned that about punk rock because I think Jim Morrison contributed a lot to punk rock culture, even though the Doors weren't necessarily punk rock themselves.
Well, but I have a theory about the Doors. Their producer was Paul Rothchild, and their engineer was Bruce Botnick, and then Jim Morrison's father was the admiral who escalated the Vietnam War. And I'm like, what if this guy was like the controlled opposition? You know, let's get all those hippies to get distracted by drugs. And
I mean,
I love a good conspiracy theory. So
I mean, there definitely is. I mean, like, listen, like, you know, a lot of those, you know, like, I mean, like, you know, I've heard some stories about Jim Morrison that are definitely odd. You know, I can't say I know for certain, but you know, I've definitely heard some stories about him that make me raise an eyebrow. What's funny is like, he's the person who inspired Iggy Pop to get into music because he went to a Doors show and he saw Jim Morrison come on stage drugged out of his mind, and I guess they were starting on I think Soul Kitchen, and he comes up and he starts singing like this, and just everyone in the crowd is getting pissed off as hell, and he's just trying to piss the crowd off more, and that anger toward the fans is definitely something that I think is key in punk rock, and I do kind of put that in with a character in my book. The ninja character is Keisuke, who by day he's an actor in Japan, and by night he's an assassin. And he hates the fact that he's famous, and he does have a lot of contempt and disdain for his fans, and he finds punk rock through his own disdain for his fans, and he's like, oh, these guys hate their fans too, cool. And that's how he gets into punk rock. And that's so
is your we'll get back to your book now. So I was enjoying talking about punk. I do. I talk to anybody about anything. I just like talking to people.
Yeah, dude, me too. Like, dude, it's all good.
I think that's writers' things. Is we like talking to people.
Absolutely.
I think artists like to be left alone. Writers like to talk to people.
Absolutely.
But so I assume your main characters are all fictional people. But is there real bands, real songs, and stuff like that?
So yeah, I mean, so that's a very good question. So yes. So I make mention of Rancid, of the Sex Pistols, I think, of the Ramones, of the Clash, of Black Flag, a bunch of bands.
I'll just
Minor Threat.
say,
Minor Threat, I make mention of.
Minor Threat. I've seen them a few times. I love them too.
Oh, I'm jealous, man. Dude, that's probably a great show.
Never mind the Bollocks is probably one of the only perfect albums out there. There's not a bad note on that album.
No, I love that album.
Yeah, me too.
The Holiday, just that intro track, I think is great. I love that song, the first song of the album. Yeah, I think it's great. But yeah, what was I gonna say? But yeah, like so and there's also mention of real life. I mean, so here's the thing about ninjas. They didn't really exist. They're kind of like an amalgamation of a bunch of different things.
Right. They're half fiction. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the closest approximation that we can get to a historical ninja are the shinobi. And basically, ninja is just a different way to read the character written of shinobi.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. So there's two ways to read that character. One is shinobi and the other is ninja. And basically, based on like the phonetic markings of scrolls we have at the time, we think that the proper pronunciation was the first one, shinobi. But yeah, so, and we think effectively what they were a subclass of samurai that specialized in espionage and guerrilla warfare tactics.
Right.
So basically, they were like the Francis Marians of Japan, basically. The Swamp Fox, where the black masks came from and the outfits and that stuff. We have our theories. One is that in Kabuki theater in Japan, it's customary for stagehands who are like moving things around stage to wear outfits like that.
Yes, there's a word for that. They're made obvious to let you know, ignore them.
We're not in the
right. And it's funny because I keep wanting to put a character name that, and it's going to drive me nuts. I have it written down as potential characters to put in my comic book, and it's going to drive me nuts. But it's basically, we are so obvious, ignore us. And that was going to be this guy's power, was that he was just like big and in everybody's way, but you just psychologically ignored him. But whatever.
That's cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
it's drive me nuts.
So I do put in a few characters. So basically, the first chapter is called Before Punk, and it's set in the late Sengoku era of Japan, so the late 16th century. And effectively, the POV character of that chapter was a real person. We don't know much about him, but Kotaro Fuma was a real person. He worked for the later Hojo clan, which operated out of Sagami.
Don't apologize. Just relax.
Sorry, I have a stutter. That's why I write all the time, because I can't talk most of the time.
No problem, man.
But yeah, but he served the later Hojo clan, which operated out of Sagami until 1590, when the second great unifier of Japan, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, sacked their castle and basically, he ended their clan. And you might recognize the later Hojo clan symbol if you play video games, because it's the Triforce, effectively. It's three tri. Yeah, so it's funny. So one of the main characters, Keisuke, is a descendant of Kotaro Fuma, and he and on his armor is the Triforce, and on the poster that Ed did for me, I had him draw that on his armor. And a few podcasts I've done, I've been asked if that's the Triforce, and I'm like, yes and no. But yeah, I mean, I don't think I can be sued for that because that's been around for a lot longer than Zelda has. So
Right.
yeah, I don't think that I can be sued for that. But I guess we'll find out.
You don't have Twitter. I was gonna say, send me that image that Ed drew, and I'll bring it up. I'm trying to look
Oh.
for it in that mail that you sent.
Oh,
But,
I think I sent the poster over the email. I think I did. If I didn't, I'm sorry.
yeah, you sent it to
Sorry. Hold on. I'll take a.
Yeah, I found
I'll take. Oh.
Okay,
Oh, you find it?
Yeah.
Wait, yeah, it's a great poster. Like honestly, I was on Instagram one day because I knew I wanted someone to do a poster for me, and I was looking for an artist, and I came across Ed, and I was like, "Oh my god, this guy's great!" And I shot him an Instagram message, and yeah, now we talk all the time. But yeah, like
Ed is a great guy. Like I said,
like
I'm rooting for him too.
There, like honestly, like he blew that out of the park. Like I mean, that is better than I ever thought it could be.
Yeah, he's so talented. But here, this is a poster of your character. Yeah, I see the Triforce now. Yeah.
Yep. So that's the symbol of the later Hojo clan, which the Fuma served. And in actual history, Kotaro Fuma was executed in 1603 by the Tokugawa shogunate, which basically won the day of the mass period of civil war. In my fictional story, Kotaro Fuma escapes to this archipelago just above Japan called.
What year is it set in?
So the opening chapter is set in 1597. The main story is set in now. Is set in. Is set in.
I was gonna say it's punk rock, and then it's set in like 1300 or something.
No, no, it's not. I mean, I do make some allegories to punk rock and things like that in those chapters. Like there is like a conceptual through line, but there are two chapters that take place in the past, and there's no mention of punk rock in those chapters. There's just some through lines that are very allegorical.
So I gotta bring this up. First off, one of my buddies is Matt Barr, and he has a comic called Rock and Roll Ninja.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and it's Chuck Dixon wrote it. It's by Splato Comics. It's really excellent. You got to see this art. He's so good.
Awesome.
It's about some guys who went to Vietnam, and they learned how to play their instruments, and then I know I'm going to mess up the story, but long story short, they got captured by a ninja clan. They became ninjas, and then they escaped. They came back to America, and they're just performing. They just want to be a band, but the ninjas won't let them go. So it's just like fighting in New York. I just love it because it's like New York in the late 70s, early 80s. You know,
that's cool.
Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to bring up, there's a comic called Deadly Class by Rick Remender. Rick Remender wrote for Marvel. He did X-Men, he did Avengers, stuff like that. But he's mostly known for his own. And they made a TV show about it, but I don't think it lasted. But it's set in the 80s, and they find young punks, bring them to the school, and train them to be ninja assassins. And the main character is going to assassinate Ronald Reagan. You know, it's based on Jodie Foster's Army. You know
was this made in the 80s? Like that was probably they probably got to watch.
As far as we know, it's still coming out. You know.
Oh, all right.
I'm like, this sounds like my comic book. You know, because like back in the 80s, you know, I didn't know anything about politics. So every politician was bad, and punk rock was. But I just find Rick Remender to be a little bit too self-indulgent. I got a couple of issues and I stopped. I think it was pretty good. I kind of liked. He had a couple of comics. One of them was called Fear Agent that I absolutely loved. But, I didn't particularly like his mainstream Marvel stuff. You know, I think he's best when he's on his own.
Yeah, for me, comics are actually me and Ed are talking about doing a comic together, but
that would be awesome.
Yeah, that's in the future. But yeah, I actually did make a comic book about a decade ago called Sons of Yellowstone. Here, the poster is right here. I can show it to you. That's can you see it?
Barely.
Yeah, it's sorry, it's basically it's not particularly good. Sorry if you couldn't see it that well. It's
It's a
not
comic.
Yeah, it's a comic book. It's still being sold. You can still get it on Amazon. I don't believe I've taken it down, but it didn't really go that far. And frankly, because I didn't do enough with it, I kind of wrote 2 drafts and was like, "This is good," and I didn't really appreciate the process of writing enough. I don't think to make something good at that point. I mean, I think the idea is really cool. I just think I didn't do enough with the idea. Where basically, it's kind of like a sci-fi old Western where it's set 20 years after a major eruption of the Yellowstone caldera, if you know what that is.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like when that thing blows.
That's like a tragedy that we're waiting to happen. It's supposed to be.
Oh God! Like when that thing blows, it's gonna cause a lot of problems.
Right, yeah.
Let's put it like that. But yeah. I mean, so basically, in the caldera there was this substance that also got ejected, and it was absorbed into some people, and it gave them powers, and they are called the Sons of Yellowstone. And the opening book is about this guy Cedric, who wanders into the city that's oddly developed considering the world just ended about just about 2 decades prior to the events of the book. And he finds that Sons of Yellowstone aren't allowed in public in this city, and he's trying to figure out why that is. I'm going to go back into it again at some point. Right now, my current focus is my novel, but once I get big enough off the novel, I do want to go back into that because I think there's a lot there. I just didn't do enough with it.
Yeah, well, your first attempt, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
you get better. It's practice.
Yeah, it's definitely rough. It's definitely like, it's definitely. I tried to pull too much from tropes and not necessarily from the archetypes that kind of drive all stories. I was trying to be very tropey, which I think is the death of good writing. I think I see like so many for instance, like if you watch something if you watch like any current Star Wars, it's like they are making shows and movies that's not about the hero's journey in that. It's about Star Wars. And when you make Star Wars that's about Star Wars, it becomes
That's a really good way to. It was bothering me, but I couldn't eloquently describe it. It's self-referential.
It is,
or as the guy from the Family Guy says, Pete Griffiths, it insists upon itself.
Yeah, like there's in the Force Awakens, they make a reference to Clerks, and about when Han Solo grabs Finn, and he's like, sanitation, like that's literally from Clerks when the scene where Randall was talking to Dante about all the contract workers who are working on Death Star that also died. And I'm just like, this is
I remember that scene, and I didn't get it, but you know why? Because at that point I was checked out. I didn't care.
You really? Yeah, I mean,
the first of the sequels, it was almost shot for shot A New Hope.
A New Hope, yeah.
I was like livid, and I was like, all right, I'll give him one. And then the second movie, I forget where it was, but sooner or later, I was like, I'm done with Star Wars. And people who watch my channel for a long time, they know I just like that Ghostbusters symbol.
Oh yeah, I mean,
and I'm done. I've never watched a
Mandalorian
or anything ever since.
Yeah, the first 2 seasons of the Mandalorian I liked. Okay, they weren't great, but I liked them for what they were. The third season was a dumpster fire, but like I tried for so long to like.
Yeah, you want to like it. You know what I mean?
I did want to like
a girlfriend. We're gonna fix this relationship, and well, it's too late. We're moving on.
Yeah, at a certain point, you have to realize that those 6 movies were the reason why Star Wars it doesn't feel right anymore because it's not George Lucas making it. Like. But
even George Lucas, the prequels, we hated the prequels so much.
I love the prequels.
Forget about this. We bullied him into selling Star Wars.
So I have a theory. Everybody hates Jar Jar Binks but I might seem crazy, but I think that Darth Jar Jar is in fact. I think that at one point was George's
It would
intention.
save it. It would save it.
So I have found something, and I've watched a lot of YouTube videos about Darth Jar Jar, and there are a lot of them that are very, very compelling. But I caught something when I was watching the Phantom Menace that I don't think anyone else has caught, and it's so convincing. And it's this. So George Lucas is very big on versus that rhyme, right? Like, there's like, for instance, like,
It's like poetry. It rhymes.
and he, like,
Just
for
to
instance,
point out, Ed is teasing us. He said, and we finally arrived at Star Wars.
but yeah, so for instance, like the last shot of Attack of the Clones is basically identical to the last shot of Empire Strikes Back. I mean, if you actually break down Attack of the Clones, it's very similar to Empire Strikes Back. But anyway, so in the Phantom Menace, after Qui-Gon meets Jar Jar in the swamps of Naboo, which, by the way, Luke meets he meets Yoda in a swamp, but that's an aside. And when Luke first meets Yoda, he's acting like a doofus, and when Qui-Gon meets Jar Jar, he's also acting like a doofus. And there's this mythological archetype called the creature on the log, which is this seemingly insignificant creature that turns out to be this great master. And Jar Jar, the theory states, is the dark side equivalent of Yoda in the first trilogy. So basically, and this is very interesting. So you recall the scene on Dagobah when Yoda lifts Luke's X-wing out of the water, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So the way that shot's framed, we see the water in the foreground, and Luke and Yoda are in the background, and Yoda is lifting the X-wing out of the water with his arm, with the Force.
Right.
The way that shot's framed, Yoda is just in front of Luke, who is to Yoda's right in the back. Now, in the Phantom Menace, when Jar Jar first dives into the water, Qui-Gon, the water's in the foreground. Qui-Gon, the master figure, is right in front of Obi-Wan, the apprentice, who is just off to Qui-Gon's right. I took screen caps of both shots. They line up perfectly.
Oh, wow.
Perfectly. Now, what's interesting is the significance of that scene. That when Yoda first lifts Luke's X-wing out of the water, that is the first time we see Yoda use the Force.
Right.
Now, when Jar Jar jumps into the water, had he been a Sith Lord, that would have been a Force jump, and that would have qualified as also the first time we have seen Jar Jar use the Force.
Okay.
That, I don't think George Lucas did that by accident. I don't.
I love this stuff because I also had a theory that if had George Lucas kept Star Wars, I think Obi-Wan would have been Leia's father.
Luke's
father.
Luke's actually, it's funny. Wait. So he would have been Luke's father?
Yeah, because hear me out on this. Remember the scene in the first movie? Anakin's a little kid. Are you an angel? And everybody hates him and everything like that. Then the second movie, Padme is like, "Oh, I'm going to see my old friend. Mm-hmm. Anakin wasn't her old friend. Anakin was a little kid.
Yes.
In my mind, she was excited to see Obi-Wan again. They were closer to the same age.
Yeah.
And then Obi-Wan, they're hanging out in the room, and then also that little slug thing tries to assassinate her. Who jumps out the window like a lover?
It's funny you mentioned that because there was a proposed plot line for Revenge of the Sith that got cut, where there was a love triangle between Padme, Obi-Wan, and Anakin.
Right. It makes it so much more interesting, and then that makes so much more sense when Anakin says, "You betrayed me."
Yeah, I mean the one.
And then he goes and he lives on the planet, and he knows his daughter's taken care of it. He goes and watches his son grow up.
My one issue with that is that The Empire Strikes Back, it came out before the prequels did, and I don't see how Vader saying that I am your father. That's
he thinks it.
What?
Because he's convinced.
Okay.
But also, we also got to understand that George Lucas is terrible with continuity. He wouldn't have had Leia.
He said continuity's for nerds. He said continuity. He said himself continuity's for nerds.
Right. I think if you don't like continuity, you're not a nerd.
Yeah, I mean, I get what he's saying to a degree. I get it because if you read Joseph Campbell and things like that, he talks about going into the unconscious and things like that, and in the unconscious, you're things like logic, time, and space just don't apply anymore. So I get what he's saying to a degree there. I do. But I get it also makes his movies sometimes a bit frustrating.
Right. I watched all 3 prequel movies going, when is C-3PO going to get his memory wiped?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Wouldn't you be like, oh, Tatooine, I've been here before.
Yeah, in the last movie.
And then the last movie, I make a joke that the credits are going up, and then the credits go down, and then he just goes, erase his memory, and then the credits continue.
Yeah. I mean, it is interesting, though, that you say about that you how the I Am Your Father scene was first shot, right?
No.
So this is crazy. So basically, who directed? Was it?
He was talking to Carrie Fisher, and he said, "I'm your daddy," as he was about to. I'm making.
So who directed? The Empire Strikes Back? Was it Kasdan or who?
Not Lucas. That was
Lucas didn't direct it.
Lucas, the first one and I think he got upset because everybody said it was the best directed.
Yeah, I mean, but anyway, so obviously
Kasdan. That's
David Prowse in the costume was saying the lines that Jones was going to dub over in. Oh yeah, it was Kirshner. Yes. But anyway, yes. So basically sorry.
It's okay.
David Prowse was saying the lines on set so Luke would have something to go off of, right?
Right.
So
it's just like the actor who played Chewbacca actually said stuff.
Yep. Yes. So basically, the actual line exchange on set was Obi-Wan. He never told you about your father. Luke says he told me enough. He told me you killed him. The line on set that Prowse said was, no, Obi-Wan killed your father. So only 4 people before Empire Strikes Back came out knew that Vader was Luke's father. It was Lucas, Kirshner, it was James Earl Jones, and it was Mark Hamill. Those were the 4 people who knew. So basically, when the film came out and it was the premiere, you had Carrie Fisher and those people like, wait, what? I am your father. Wait, it was a complete. Yeah, it was.
And I'll never forget going to school on a Monday. It opened on a Friday. And then James Facen, 6th grade, comes walking into the school and screams, "Darth Vader is Luke's father." And I still don't like James Facen to this day.
That's funny. I remember seeing that because I remember I was a kid when the special editions got put in the theaters. And I remember as a kid seeing that in theaters, and I remember thinking that Vader was lying. And that's interesting because the scene where Yoda talks to Luke about Vader in 6, and Luke says, "Is Darth Vader my father?" And Yoda says, "Your father he is." Lucas actually talked to a children's psychologist about that, and she said to Lucas, like, you need to have a scene where one of the good guys tells Luke that Vader is in fact his father, or else kids will think that
it's a lie.
Vader's lying. So it's interesting. And what's even more
I remember that when Yoda said there is another.
Yep.
And then that was like kid debates
yep.
in the schoolyard for years. Who's the other? And it was like Leia's the other. And I was convinced it was Lando Calrissian. And my argument was like, this is a guy that infiltrated Yoda's palace, Jabba's palace, dressed up as a guard. He must have gotten to fights. He had to imitate. This wasn't just like a union job where you weren't allowed to. You know what I mean? These were murderers and whatever. And he made his way up into like a good, but he didn't have the Force. He wasn't an 8-foot-tall Wookiee. He didn't have a thermal detonator or anything like that. He was just a guy. So I always thought like there had to be more to him than and then he blew up the Death Star.
I think Lucas's original idea for the other was supposed to be Luke's sister, but Luke's sister, Luke's sister was not always going to be Leia.
Yeah, that's obvious.
Yeah, it's pretty obvious. But yeah, I mean, I think what happened with the making of episode 6, and if I'm incorrect, but I think what happened was Lucas got very burnt out in the middle of making of episode 6, and I think his original plan was he was going to make 7, 8, and 9 during the 80s and the beginning of the 90s, but then he burnt out, so he was like, okay, so we'll make Leia Luke's sister and just call it at that. But I think the original ending for episode 6 was that Luke was going to go off into the unknown regions of the galaxy trying to look for his sister. And I believe the original idea for 7, 8, and 9 were going to be Luke in the unknown regions and basically trying to find his sister. I believe that's the case.
I was always convinced, and I based this just on my own, that it was going to be, especially after the prequels, they were talking about duality and, Yoda's like, they're all like this. He's going to bring balance to the Force, which implies that the Force is imbalanced. But when you look
non-duality is the key.
When you look at the first one, Coruscant is beautiful and everything like that.
Yep.
If this guy's going to bring balance, we all got it wrong as far as my thinking, because there was too much good.
Well,
and that's why the Jedi Council didn't want to help Luke. They didn't want to help Anakin because they liked the good. And Mace Windu was like, this is the guy. And Mace Windu had the purple. Like, Mace Windu is half evil, if you ask me.
And that's kind of the issue about the nature of good and evil, is that there's a great line in the movie, actually, that just came out, Nosferatu, where basically he says, you cannot fight the darkness without first acknowledging that it exists.
Right.
And basically, I get into that in the novel, where basically Keisuke throughout the first half of the book thinks he's the good guy, but bad things keep happening because his idea of good is terrible, but he tries to be good and just bad things keep happening. And basically the only way you can truly combat darkness is to be very, very aware of it, and that's in yourself, and that's everywhere. And I think there is an issue with people who try to be so good that the darkness inside them can sometimes come out in ways that they don't foresee, and it can control them. And I think
you could become like
it possesses you,
like Marat. in one of my favorite historical characters, the guy who laid in the bathtub and just wrote letters and got people executed. I think he thought he was a social justice warrior who's.
Everyone who you can look at who has done something terrible, if you read what they wrote, they all thought they were doing something great.
Yeah, I used to think that religion was the bad thing, and then I learned about atrocities created by the atheists, like the communists, and I came to realize it's zealotry that is the bad thing.
It's the nature of duality, and if you think you are good, and good is supposed to destroy evil, well, obviously you will see yourself as morally justified to be as inhuman as and as cruel as possible to what you see as evil, because you are good and evil is not you, and you want to destroy evil.
Right.
And that's effectively the folly of mankind.
Sorry. C.S. Lewis said that, like a tyranny of like.
I love that quote. I love that quote.
And I know I'm going to murder it, but C.S. Lewis basically said he would rather be under like a robber baron, because they'll eventually get tired of oppressing you. But he goes, but not the righteous. They will oppress you forever and never stop.
I believe his exact word was. Yes, I believe his exact word was, they will do it at the permission of their own conscience. I believe this is the exact.
Of course, a legendary writer, Yeah,
dude, I love C.S. Lewis, and totally. But
I got to do another show at 8:30. Awesome. Anything you want to bring up? Anything you want to say that I didn't give you a chance because I talked too much?
No, I mean, I just wanted to say thank you for having me on.
It was fun.
If you guys want to check my book out, the link is below on Amazon. If you could check it out, that would be great. I truly think I've written something special, and that once it catches on, people will love it. We are in the Wild West again, as far as like media goes, and this is my contribution to that, and I truly think it can be huge, and that's my goal. And so if you guys could check it out, and that would be great. Also, if you want to give me a follow on Instagram at Jeff Nelson Author, I'm
gonna put your
that'd also be great. Yes.
And there we go. Cool.
Okay.
This is your first novel?
First novel. Yep.
Oh, good for you, man. Yeah.
Dude, thank you so much for having me on.
Conversation with somebody, it cost me $20 at least, because I always end up buying their books, buying their comics.
Thanks for having me on again, man. I really appreciate it. I hope you have me on again sometime. Thank
you. So much. I would love to have you and Ed on. Apparently, you guys are friends, and
Oh yeah, we talk all the time.
Yeah, that would be awesome. For Ed Lillard, he's in the chat. Ed Lilly, I keep saying the wrong name. He's going to be launching a crowdfund soon.
His work is great.
He's so talented, That's cool. If you guys work together, man, that would be awesome.
We're gonna.
I know at one point, if my third comic is successful, I want to follow it up, and I would love to have Ed do some artwork for.
Oh yeah.
Because I want to get like 10 different artists to do 10 different stories. It would be awesome.
That'd be really cool.
Yeah.
But again,
thanks, Ed.
Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate you, and I will. Talk soon. Cheers.
Right, bye-bye. Ed, in 15 minutes on the same channel, we're going to do It's Clobbered Time, where us nerds talk about who comic book characters would win in a fight. So see you in 15 minutes, guys. And yes, thank you, Marcus. My comic is still available. I'm still getting like a sale or two every day or two. I'm getting great reviews. I'm so nervous. I just sent the copy to Mike Barron. Let's hear him rip it apart. But I don't know. I'm all excited. And you talk about ninjas. Just today, I thought up a ninja scene in my comic that I can't wait to put in somewhere around issue 5, issue 6.
Cool. Hey, they make everything cooler, man. I love ninjas. They make everything cooler.
It's like sugar on cereal, man.
They make everything cooler. Yeah. Absolutely. All right, man. I'll see you.
And it's an open invite for It's Clobbering Time. If anybody wants to come in and argue and fun argue, see you in 15 minutes, everybody, or 10 minutes now. Bye-bye.